Epilepsy warning for flashing lights and colors. Hey everyone, it's Peter from Theme Park Crazy, and welcome to another Dark Rides video. Now, I am still working on my 10 Unsolved Roller Coaster Mysteries video, and you can expect that one in a few days. But after the response I got on my last video, I think another Dark Rides video would be fun to do. These are Dark Rides where the execution makes you think, who thought this was a good idea? You could actually consider this a follow-up to my 2021 video, Top 10 Worst Dark Rides Ever. Personally, I think that roasting dark rides is a great way to start the new year. Just like how you can start your day with this video's sponsor, Magic Spoon. Magic Spoon is most well known for their high-protein fueling cereal with the taste you remember as a kid. But Magic Spoon also has a delicious line of treats. These come in several flavors: chocolate peanut butter, marshmallow, double chocolate, and blueberry muffin. These treats are excellent, with 11 to 12 grams of protein, 1 gram of sugar, and 1 to 3 grams of net carbs. You can get all the fuel you need on the go. As someone who's been watching my sugar intake and looking for something sweet, these treats are simply perfection. And as if that weren't enough, Magic Spoon has a new line of scrumptious granola as well. This granola has 13 grams of protein and 0 added sugar. It comes in flavors like honey almond and peanut butter, or you could use this mixed berry flavor to make this awesome parfait. If you're interested in trying out Magic Spoon, use my promo code CRAZY or click the link in the description to try Magic Spoon treats or granola today. You'll get $5 off, and you can find Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store too. Plus, Magic Spoon is so confident in their product that it's backed with a 100% happiness guarantee. So if you don't like it for any reason, they'll refund your money with no questions asked. So start off the new year right and grab yourself some Magic Spoon today. Now first, we're going to talk about a ride called Konga at Parc d'Attractions Marseillon Plage. If you remember, this is where that awful tornado roller coaster from M&D's was relocated to. But they also have a very strange dinosaur dark ride that just comes across as slapped together. Now the exterior is more like a fairground ride and it's pretty colorful. It even has a 3-dimensional cutout of King Kong. But just like with Pirates Hideaway at New Jersey's Casino Pier, looks can be deceiving. So you get on board and you're given these laser guns. And one thing I will say is that the sound effect is pretty cool. So upon entering, you go through a strip door where the plastic strips just swipe over your head and everyone else's heads. And throughout the layout, your job is to shoot these giant flashing targets that are just stuck onto all of the dinosaur figures. And what I love about this ride is how clearly low budget it is. All the dinosaurs are clearly on mechanisms, with the first one being a Tyrannosaurus head that's on this steel structure on the wall. There's also velociraptors, a giant spider, and for some reason this very tiny T-Rex that I'm fairly certain they just got at a toy store somewhere. And you just gotta love how obvious the targets are. It's like they went onto a wholesaler and searched laser tag and got the first targets they could find. Hell, you could even see the wires that are plugged into them. Another odd thing about this ride is that about halfway through, the vehicles just stop and then start shaking. There's nothing in the ride's story, well, I mean there is no story, but there's nothing that would indicate there's any kind of earthquake or something. Maybe it's a dinosaur's footsteps? But it's just kind of an odd feature, and the vehicle comes to a complete stop at this point, so it pretty much serves to just drag out the ride. And finally, some of the targets actually make noise, and I don't know about you, but this is the sound of pure anxiety. At the end of the ride, you come across King Kong's head on the wall, looking like some kind of bizarre hunting trophy. Finally, there's one more thing I want to bring up, and it's this guy. This is just hilarious, and I'm fairly certain that if your head was in that position, you would be dead. Now you might be wondering, after the ride ends, how do I detect my score? I don't see any scoreboards on the ride vehicles. Well, at the end, the ride operator will actually tell you who got the highest score based on the number on their gun. And the winner gets a prize, which is actually pretty cool. Now just because I'm putting this video on a list of bad dark rides doesn't mean that it's not fun to ride. I definitely call this a so bad it's good ride. And I'd recommend it if you're ever traveling in France. Next up, why not, let's talk about another dinosaur dark ride, Dino Park at Poland's Luna Park Robland. Now you might recognize this park from one of my recent videos on the worst rated roller coasters in the world. In that video, we discussed the bizarre swing launch coaster called Euromir, no relation to the Europa Park spinning coaster. And as of right now, it is rated the #1 worst roller coaster in the world on CaptainCoaster.com, excluding kiddie coasters, which later are removed from the ranking system. But as for the dark ride that's literally right next to it, it's called Dino Park, and this one is just comically bad. It's pretty much the equivalent of putting dinosaurs on Terminus. Yes, Terminus, not Terminus as I called it in the video for some reason. My friends who watch The Walking Dead let me know that. But if you remember, Terminus was literally just a metal box with hardly anything in it worth looking at. No scenery, nothing interesting, just a hot metal box. Now with this ride, they did actually bother to throw in some dinosaurs, but they're of the cheapest variety. Some of them you can actually see the paint flaking off. After ascending a curved lift, you enter a room with black tarps surrounding you, and what I assume is a T-Rex seen through a hole in the wall. Then immediately on the right, there's actually a scene that I think is a bit too graphic to show here. It's pretty gory stuff. Personally, I don't think it's that bad at all, but you never know with YouTube. Afterwards, in typical Ghost Train fashion, there's a break on the outside. Here you'll pass a statue of what I think is a velociraptor, and some dinosaur heads sticking out of the wall. After a Spinosaurus and a T-Rex door, you'll see a dinosaur holding up a smaller dinosaur with his teeth, no hands. Then there's what I think is a caveman popping up from behind those rocks. Then you'll come across a pterosaur flapping his wings, a gorilla pounding his chest, the same T-Rex you saw before, a dinosaur's head sticking out of the wall, some eggs, and I think a dinosaur's claw. It's kinda hard to tell. After that, the ride just ends. This is definitely the cheapest dinosaur ride I've ever seen. And for some reason I want to ride it, and I don't know why. Now, since we're already in Poland, let's talk about a dark ride that's more elaborate but much less coherent. This is called Monster House at Energylandia. Now, Energylandia is mostly known for its coaster collection. It has some of the best coasters in the world, and one of the worst too. But you never really hear anything about its dark rides, and there's a reason why. Now, you look at the name Monster House, and you would expect just that, a house with ghosts and ghouls and vampires, skeletons, zombies, etc. Now, would you believe that this dark ride has more to do with aliens than monsters? If you go on the website, the ride description doesn't even mention aliens. At the station, you board these goofy-looking vehicles with faces on the back, surrounded by piles of skulls. Then, after passing under a skull, the first thing you see on your right is aliens, so no punches pulled here. And then the ride is like, oh no, we forgot it's a haunted house, here's a graveyard, and then more aliens on the right. Then you've got spiderwebs, an alien with Mega Man's handgun, a quarantine city, a large alien wrapped in caution tape, I think. And the ride doesn't make any sense from there either. Because in one room, in one single shot, you've got 2 aliens, a volcano, and a bunch of mummified bodies. Then suddenly you get the knockoff Power Rangers, I guess, or some galactic police force dressed in robo-suits. I don't know what's going on here, I just don't. Later, you come across the alien's UFO, and eventually you get to this extremely bizarre section where there's a bunch of what I think are dinosaur skulls on large sticks. Oh, and a photo of a possessed girl. What were they even thinking? Like, this is the most confusing dark ride I've ever seen. How can you call it Monster House when 90% of the ride is encountering aliens? At least if they put aliens on that new Indiana Jones ride they're making, that would make sense in the context of the films, but here there's no context. In all seriousness, I would love to learn about this ride's development. I'm sure there are some fascinating stories. Now, let's head east to the Middle East for a ride that's much more lazy than strange. This is the amazing ride of Gumball at IMG Worlds of Adventure in Dubai. Now you might be thinking, that sounds like a great idea, a dark ride based on the amazing adventures of Gumball? Sorry, the amazing world of Gumball? God, I would never hear the end of it if I called it that. But yeah, you might be thinking that this ride would be pretty cool, but it really isn't. Now, this is a shooting dark ride where you shoot targets and score points. But the big issue with this ride is the set design. A lot of these rooms feel big, empty, and sparsely decorated. Like, this is supposed to be the Wattersons' living room, but the doorway at the top is just a painted wall, and the entrance to the kitchen is just painted on too, as if the coyote was trying to trick the Roadrunner. Now, with that said, there are cutscenes. I don't know if you'd call them cutscenes on a dark ride, but there are cutscenes involving the cast of Gumball. And the original voice actors do reprise their roles here, but that isn't the case when the characters are heard and not seen. Yes, for some reason, the voice actors are present on the screen segments, but not on the rest of the ride. It's actually a mystery who voiced the characters here, and they're unknown voice actors. Now, the screen segments are not unlike Toy Story Midway Mania, where you get to shoot and interact with what you see on screen. But on other parts of the ride, they have these big, distracting light-up targets just glued onto the walls. Now, a good dark ride, like a dark ride made by Sally, would have targets scattered around the sets so that guests can interact with specific pieces of scenery. But here, they just plastered a bunch of targets on the wall and said, "Here, shoot these for points." Now, the characters do appear throughout the layout, but they're in the form of 2D cutouts or non-moving 3D figures. Other than all of that, there's not much else to say because this ride doesn't really give me a lot to work with. I will give Cartoon Network credit for providing original animation for this ride, but it's clear that there were a lot of budget cuts and corners cut. Finally, we're going to discuss a dark ride that is often labeled as the worst of all time. But the thing is, many people did not get to ride it because this ride was only open for one season. You see, back in 2008, Hard Rock Park opened in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. This park was themed to rock and roll and had the licensing of the Hard Rock Cafes. Among its major attractions was a roller coaster named Led Zeppelin the Ride and a dark ride named Nights in White Satin. This was a ride based on the Moody Blues song of the same name. Originally, it was going to be a Beatles dark ride, but what they ended up making was still incredible. This was made by the fine folks at Sally Dark Rides, and it was a truly psychedelic experience. In fact, the full name of the ride was Nights in White Satin The Trip, and that pretty much sums it up. You've got the song playing on the soundtrack, you've got screen projections of really bizarre imagery, and you've got tons of colorful lighting and effects and even scents. It was a truly ambitious dark ride and an achievement by Sally Dark Rides. Unfortunately, the park opened the same year as the global recession of 2008. Not only that, but they hardly marketed the park at all, thinking that just the Hard Rock name alone and its location in Myrtle Beach would be enough. So in its second and final season, the park was rebranded to Freestyle Music Park. A lot of the ride names were changed to avoid the music licenses. And unfortunately, Nights in White Satin was turned into Monstars of Rock. Now, this is what would happen if you took a really crappy Deke show and turned it into a dark ride. Now, Sally had nothing to do with this ride, and instead, a lot of the work on this ride was done by iTech Entertainment. Now, that's not to say anything bad about iTech, they worked on Revenge of the Mummy at Universal. But it's clear they had very limited time and a very limited budget to work with. Gone were the psychedelic themes and effects, and in their place were 2D cutouts and really corny, unfunny gags. The plot of the ride centered on a band of monsters getting ready for a big show. You had a zombie named D. Frib, an Igor-like character named Dex, a Frankenstein character named Skins, a Headless Horseman character named Rox, and a mummy named Riff the Ripper. So let's talk about the ride itself. The first scene, you walk in on Skins in the shower. I did not need to see partially nude Frankenstein today. But even worse, there's this really bad gag on the left where there are 5 brains in jars. John, Paul, George, Ringo, and Britney? Yeah, considering what we know today about Britney Spears, I'd say this joke hasn't exactly aged well. Then you've got a Beatles reference on an Egyptian mural, D. Frib buying arms from a second-hand store, oh god. And all the way through, you've got barely moving cutouts and a deeply uninteresting story. You know, you could make the argument that this is as bad or even worse than Superstar Limo, because at least people remember Superstar Limo. Just a series of cheesy jokes and cheap effects, and it all adds up to a ride that's so forgettable that people don't even remember how bad it is. In the end, Freestyle Music Park, as it was, only operated for one season, just like Hard Rock Park. I'm sure it also didn't help that Freestyle Music Park sounds more like a Wii shovelware game than an actual place to have fun at, but it's still interesting to look up its history. All that said, I hope you enjoyed this look at really bad dark rides, and I'm sure it definitely won't be the last dark rides video I ever make. So feel free to suggest some interesting dark rides down below and I'll take a look at them. This is Peter from Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you all soon.